The moment I opened my eyes, the past rushed back like a nightmare. I was sitting at the same dining table where everything went wrong. My sister's voice filled my mind, not spoken but heard. That was when I realized I had been reborn, and this time I could hear thoughts. The heavy wooden chairs remained unchanged. The long dining table stood exactly as before, and the two men across from me were the same. My father's voice echoed through the room, filled with authority as he prepared to announce the marriage decisions. My hands trembled slightly, but I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay calm. This was the moment my fate had been sealed in my past life. But this time, things would be different. Across from me, Ethan Carter, with his gentle eyes and soft demeanor, sat next to his half-brother, Logan Carter, whose sharp gaze and cold expression sent chills down my spine. One was a wolf in sheep's clothing, the other a ruthless but powerful man. Last time, I had chosen Ethan, believing his kindness was real. But I had been wrong. And this time, I could hear the truth in people's minds. My sister Sophia sat beside me, looking confident. Her delicate fingers tapped lightly against the wooden table as she waited for the moment she had been anticipating. And then it happened. Her voice filled my head, clear as day. This time, I have to grab the best husband first. I won't let Susan take what should be mine. I turned to look at her, but her lips never moved. That's when it hit me. She had also been reborn. Everything fell into place. In my past life, she had married Logan, the cold and indifferent heir of the Carter family, but he had treated her like a stranger. Meanwhile, I had married Ethan, and at first, he had been everything a woman could wish for. Caring, affectionate, devoted. Until one day, he changed. The man who had pampered me started to show his true nature, manipulative, cruel, and heartless. By the time I realized it was too late, my life had ended because of them. Now, my father spoke again, unaware of the battle unfolding between Sophia and me. Sophia, since you seem to have chosen Ethan, then Susan will marry Logan. Sophia smirked slightly as she moved closer to Ethan, acting shy and delicate. I like you, she said sweetly, stealing the exact words I had spoken in my past life. Ethan smiled, placing his hand gently over hers. His thoughts rang in my mind immediately. What a beautiful little doll. I can't wait to play with her. A chill ran down my spine. My heart pounded as I realized how close I had been to falling into his trap again. I smiled, masking the storm inside me. I actually like Logan too, I said, watching Sophia's reaction carefully. Her eyes widened slightly before a victorious look crossed her face. She believed she had won. But I knew the truth she didn't. Logan Carter was not the man she thought he was, and Ethan was far worse than she imagined. I walked toward Logan, taking the seat beside him. His gaze flickered toward me for a moment before he looked away, uninterested. Unlike Ethan, whose charm was meant to deceive, Logan was truly emotionless. I tried listening to his thoughts, but for some reason, I heard nothing. Ethan's eyes, however, were filled with amusement as he looked at me from across the table. He had no idea I could see through his facade now. The wedding preparations moved fast. Just like in my past life, Logan never appeared during the ceremonies. He remained absent while Ethan played the perfect groom, taking Sophia's hand in front of everyone, making it seem like they were the happiest couple alive. At the wedding, Sophia took every chance to flaunt her new life, holding Ethan's arm proudly as they walked past me. "Where's Logan?" she asked, her voice laced with mockery. "Did he decide not to marry you after all?" I met her gaze calmly. "You don't have to worry about me, Sophia," I replied smoothly. "Just make sure you take care of yourself." Her face darkened slightly before she looked away. Inside her mind, I heard her bitter thoughts. Let her act superior now. Soon, she'll be crying, just like I did in my past life. She really believed Logan would destroy me. But this time, I wouldn't let my fate be controlled. At the tea ceremony, where the daughters-in-law paid respect to the Carter family elders, Sophia's eyes gleamed with mischief. I already knew what she was planning. 1, 2, 3. On the third step, I sidestepped gracefully, avoiding her attempt to trip me. Instead, she lost her balance and fell forward, spilling tea all over herself. Gasps echoed around the room. Sophia's face flushed with embarrassment as she looked up at Mrs. Carter, who was watching with thinly veiled disappointment. So reckless, Mrs. Carter muttered, shaking her head. Do you even look like a proper daughter-in-law? Sophia stammered. It wasn't on purpose, but it didn't matter. She had made a fool of herself in front of the most powerful woman in the Carter family. By contrast, when I approached Mrs. Carter with perfect grace and composure, she smiled approvingly. Susan, tonight, I will make sure Logan comes home. He should make it up to you. Sophia's expression turned even darker. In her mind, I heard her scream in frustration. Why is she always so lucky? That night, Logan actually came home. Unlike my past life, where I had been left alone to endure humiliation, this time, he walked through the door, loosening his tie. He looked exhausted, but still he was here. I took a step toward him. You must be tired, I said, reaching for his jacket. He barely acknowledged me, simply tossing the jacket on the couch before heading toward the bathroom. I watched him disappear behind the door before sitting down. It was strange. Logan had been cruel to Sophia in our past life. But now, he was distant but not unkind. I didn't expect love from this marriage, but as long as I could stay safe, I would build my own future, my own power, without relying on anyone. And yet, something about Logan's unreadable nature made me uneasy. For the first time, I wondered, was Sophia truly the only one who had been reborn? Logan Carter was not a man who spoke unnecessarily. His presence alone carried a weight that made others cautious. That night, as he settled in, I prepared a separate space for myself. In my past life, my sister had suffered beside him, but I would not make the same mistake she did. I had a plan, and the first step was ensuring my survival. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of water running. Logan was already up, finishing his workout before taking a shower. His discipline was impressive, but I wasn't here to admire him. I had other priorities. While he got dressed, I prepared tea, arranging everything neatly. He stepped out of the room, adjusting his cufflinks. Without glancing at me, he muttered, "Be ready in 10 minutes." I looked at him, confused. For what? He finally met my gaze, his expression unreadable. You are my wife now. It's time you learn how the Carter business works. I hadn't expected this. In my past life, Sophia had ignored any responsibility, choosing instead to rely on Logan's wealth. But I wouldn't be like her. This was an opportunity one couldn't waste. At the breakfast table, Mrs. Carter observed us carefully. Her sharp eyes studied my every move, but I remained calm, maintaining a respectful posture. Sophia and Ethan arrived shortly after, walking in hand. My sister wore a delicate dress, her makeup flawless, but I could see through her act. The moment she saw me sitting beside Logan, her thoughts screamed with frustration. Why does she always end up in the better position? Ethan pulled out a chair for her, whispering something in her ear that made her giggle. I ignored them, keeping my focus on my plate, but I couldn't block out Ethan's thoughts. She looks better than before. Maybe I made the wrong choice. Disgust crawled up my spine, but I schooled my expression into indifference. Sophia might think she had one, but she had no idea about the monster she had chosen. As breakfast ended, Mrs. Carter placed her teacup down with a soft clink. Susan, after visiting the company, you will return and assist with household matters. I nodded respectfully. Of course, Mother. Sophia's smile twitched. In her past life, she had been dismissed as incompetent, never earning Mrs. Carter's trust. She must have thought I would face the same fate, but I had no intention of giving her the satisfaction. Logan stood, signaling for me to follow. As we stepped outside, I noticed the sleek black car waiting for us. A driver opened the door, and Logan motioned for me to get in first. Once we were seated, silence filled the space between us. I glanced at him. You don't seem like someone who involves others in business. He didn't react. I don't. Then why are you taking me? I asked. He finally looked at me, eyes assessing. Because you're different. That answer didn't explain much, but I didn't push further. At the office, Logan led me through the grand building. Employees greeted him with a mix of respect and fear. He carried himself with authority, each step precise and measured. Inside the meeting room, negotiations were already underway. A British businessman, Jack, sat across the table, explaining the benefits of a formula his company had developed. Logan listened, expression unreadable. When Jack confidently named his price, I could hear his thoughts. This formula is worthless. I'll make sure they overpay. Logan remained silent, considering his options. I knew I couldn't openly reveal what I had heard, so I chose my words carefully. Picking up the product sample, I examined it closely. This formula only contains surface-level effects, I said casually. It's not worth $3 million. Jack's expression stiffened. Logan turned to me, raising an eyebrow but saying nothing. I continued, there are no anti-aging properties, no deep skin benefits. At most, it's worth $10,000. The businessman looked furious. Miss Carter, you don't understand the value of branding. I smiled. Oh, I do. And that's all this product has. No real quality, just a name. The Carter family doesn't invest in false promises. Silence filled the room. Logan finally leaned back in his chair, his lips curling slightly. $1 million, he said. Final offer. Jack hesitated, his confidence shaken. He glanced between us, then finally agreed. Logan signed the deal, and as we left the meeting, he spoke without looking at me. You know business. I shrugged. I know how to spot a scam. He glanced sideways. Interesting. As we returned home, I felt a sense of accomplishment. This life was already different from before. I had influence, control, but I knew Sophia wouldn't sit still. That evening, she came to my room, pretending to be friendly. Sister, she began, her voice sugary sweet. Mother asked me to help you adjust. After all, being Logan's wife must be difficult. I studied her carefully, hearing her true thoughts. Let's see how long she lasts. Soon, she'll be humiliated. I smiled. That's very kind of you, Sophia. Her confidence wavered for a second before she continued. Tomorrow, I'll introduce you to some of the other women in the family. They have high expectations. I knew what she was doing, trying to set me up for failure. In my past life, she had dragged me into situations where I was mocked and belittled. But this time I was ready. The next day, as we arrived at the gathering, Sophia wore a victorious smirk. The women in the room greeted her warmly, ignoring me. I stayed silent, letting her believe she was in control. One of the women, Lady Rosalind, eyed me with disapproval. You're the new Carter bride? You seem quiet. Sophia's thoughts rang loud in my head. That's right, make her feel small. Keep going. I met Rosalind's gaze and smiled. I believe in observing before speaking. It prevents unnecessary mistakes. A flicker of surprise crossed her face. That's a rare trait. Sophia's irritation grew. She had wanted me to embarrass myself, but now she was losing control of the situation. I had played this game before, and I wasn't going to let history repeat itself. As we returned home, she barely spoke, her frustration evident. When we stepped inside, she turned sharply. You think you're so clever, don't you? She hissed. I tilted my head. I think I learned from my mistakes. Her expression darkened. You won't win. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. I already have. Sophia clenched her fists, eyes burning with rage. But she didn't realize she had already lost the moment I woke up in this life. I wouldn't let her ruin me again. Logan arrived home late that night. He walked past me without a word, but then he stopped, glancing back. You handled yourself well today, he said simply before continuing on. I stared after him, a strange feeling settling in my chest. Logan was unreadable, but for the first time, I wondered, was he truly indifferent, or was he simply waiting to see my true strength? This life was mine to control, and I would never let anyone take it away again. The underground cells beneath the Carter estate were cold and damp. The silence was thick, broken only by the occasional distant footsteps of the guards. I stood before the iron bars, staring at the person inside. Sophia sat on the floor, her once perfect appearance now ruined. Her dress was wrinkled, her hair a tangled mess, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. But the fire in them remained. Her hands gripped the bars tightly, her fingers pale from the pressure. How did you know? She demanded, voice sharp with frustration. How did you find out about the poison? I crossed my arms, meeting her gaze without fear. Does it matter now? Her breathing grew heavy, her knuckles whitening. You came back too, didn't you? Hearing those words, I smiled. Took you long enough to figure it out. A harsh laugh escaped her lips, filled with bitterness. You've been acting too perfectly, dodging every trap. No wonder. You remember everything just like I do. I leaned slightly closer. Yet, even with a second chance, you still made the wrong choices. Sophia clenched her teeth, her eyes burning with anger. You were never supposed to win. That was my fate, my life, my power. I shook my head. That's the difference between us, Sophia. You want someone else to build your happiness. I build mine myself. Her fist slammed against the bars. You think this is over? You think I'll just accept this? I'll find a way out. And when I do, I'll make sure you regret everything. Her voice echoed through the cell, filled with desperation. But I wasn't afraid. She had lost. There was no coming back from this. Turning away, I walked out, leaving her in the darkness she had created for herself. Ethan was waiting in the next cell, sitting calmly on the small cot, folding a blanket with practiced precision. Even after everything, he looked relaxed, as if nothing had changed. When he saw me, a slow smirk formed on his lips. You're clever, he admitted. I underestimated you. I stayed silent, unwilling to waste words on him. He chuckled. I almost killed Sophia for you, you know. I was willing to do it. Disgust twisted in my stomach. You deserve to be here. He stood, walking toward the bars, watching me closely. Did you ever think, just for a second, that we could have been something? That maybe, deep down, you enjoyed the way I looked at you? My hands curled into fists. You make me sick. He sighed dramatically, shaking his head. Such a waste. I turned on my heel, leaving him behind. The doors locked behind me with a heavy clang, sealing them inside. I had escaped them both. That night, Logan came home late. I had expected him to ignore me as usual, but instead, he walked straight into my room, shutting the door behind him. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing strong forearms. There was something unreadable in his eyes. You were gone for a while today, he said, voice low. I met his gaze, trying to remain steady. I visited Sophia and Ethan. His jaw tightened slightly. Why? I wanted to see their faces after losing everything. Logan studied me for a long moment before stepping closer. And, did it feel good? I hesitated. Yes. His lips curved slightly. You're not as innocent as you pretend to be. I didn't reply. He was right. The old me had been weak, naive, too trusting. This me was different. Logan reached out, his fingers brushing a stray strand of hair behind my ear. I don't mind. The touch sent an unfamiliar warmth through me, but I pushed it away. What do you want, Logan? He tilted his head slightly, watching me closely. Tell me, are you planning to leave me? His words sent a chill through my veins. Did he know? Had he figured it out? I forced a calm expression. Why would I? His dark eyes searched mine. Because you don't need me. You've been making plans, haven't you? I swallowed, but he caught the movement. His fingers tilted my chin up slightly. Tell me the truth, Susan. I took a slow breath. I want my freedom. That's all. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he let go, stepping back. I see. I expected him to be angry, to argue. Instead, he just nodded once, as if accepting my answer. Then he turned toward the door. Good night, Susan. I watched him leave, confusion settling in my chest. Logan was never predictable. That was what made him dangerous. The next morning, the house was unusually quiet. At breakfast, Mrs. Carter's expression was unreadable. Halfway through the meal, she set down her spoon and looked directly at Sophia's empty chair. I've decided to leave Sophia where she is for now, she announced. She has proven unfit for this family. Ethan's name wasn't even mentioned. He no longer existed in their world. I didn't react, but inside, I knew this was the final confirmation that Sophia had truly lost everything. Later that evening, Logan took me out to a formal gathering. He never invited me anywhere before, so I knew this wasn't a simple dinner. It was a test. Inside the grand banquet hall, eyes turned toward us, curious and calculating. Logan led me inside, his presence commanding attention. I kept my posture straight, knowing this was another moment that could change my future. Across the room, a familiar voice reached my ears. Sophia. She wasn't supposed to be here. I turned, finding her standing with Ethan, holding his arm tightly. She had cleaned up well, covering her bruises with makeup, but there was something different in her eyes. She met my gaze, and her thoughts rushed into my mind. Tonight I end this. A sudden, sharp instinct ran through me. She wasn't just here to watch. She was planning something. Logan leaned in slightly, voice low. She shouldn't be here. I know. Before I could react, Sophia smiled sweetly and walked straight toward us, Ethan following behind. Sister, she greeted, her tone smooth. Brother-in-law. Logan remained silent, his grip on my hand tightening slightly. Sophia tilted her head. I hear you've been adjusting well. That's nice, but I hope you're not too comfortable. My heartbeat remained steady. What are you trying to say? Ethan smirked. Just that things can change in an instant. Their words confirmed my suspicion. This wasn't just a social visit. They had something planned. Logan's voice was calm. If you try anything, you won't make it out of here. Sophia's eyes flashed with something close to madness. Let's see about that, brother. Then she turned, walking away as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. Something was coming, and I was ready. The air inside the grand banquet hall was thick with tension. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting golden light across the polished marble floors. Laughter and conversation filled the room, but my focus was locked on Sophia and Ethan. They had walked in like they belonged, wearing confident smiles, but I could hear the truth in their thoughts. Tonight, I take back everything. Susan won't see it coming. Logan won't escape this time. He'll be dead before sunrise. I kept my face calm, my posture relaxed. But inside, I was already calculating my next move. Logan's hand rested lightly on my waist, a silent reassurance that he had noticed their presence too. He leaned in slightly, his voice low. They're planning something. I nodded, my eyes never leaving my sister. I know. Across the room, Sophia lifted her glass, tilting it slightly in a mock toast before taking a sip. I could feel the weight of her unspoken challenge. Ethan whispered something to her, his smirk widening. My stomach twisted. They were too confident, too sure of themselves. Something was about to happen. A waiter passed by offering wine. I waved it away, but Sophia smiled sweetly and took a glass, handing another to Ethan. My fingers curled slightly. Logan turned his head toward me. It's poisoned, he said quietly. I met his gaze. I know. Sophia thought she was clever, that history would repeat itself. She had laced one of the drinks with something lethal, hoping Logan would drink it unknowingly. But she had underestimated me. I reached forward, suddenly, grabbing the glass from her hand. You always did have good taste in wine, I said, raising it toward the light. Her expression flickered for just a second before she forced a laugh. You shouldn't take someone else's drink, sister. I twirled the glass in my hand, watching the liquid swirl elegantly. Why not? We're family. I'm sure you wouldn't mind. Ethan's fingers tightened slightly around his own drink, his confidence wavering. They weren't expecting this. I held the glass out to Sophia, offering it back. You drink first. Her smile froze. She knows. Ethan's expression darkened. Logan, standing beside me, remained silent, but I could sense his amusement. He was letting me handle this, watching to see how I would turn the game around. Sophia hesitated for too long. The room was still buzzing with conversation, but nearby guests had begun to notice the standoff. I took a small step forward, lowering my voice. Drink it, Sophia. Unless, of course, there's something wrong with it. Her hands trembled slightly. For the first time, I saw true fear in her eyes. She turned desperately to Ethan, but he was already stepping back, his eyes cold and calculating. She failed. She's useless now. Sophia realized it at the same time I did. Ethan was abandoning her. Her breath hitched. Ethan, help me, she whispered. He set his drink down carefully. You were the one who said you could handle this. You made the mistake, not me. A sharp gasp escaped her lips as realization hit her like a slap. He had never truly been on her side. I sighed softly. Sophia, did you really think Ethan was ever going to protect you? Tears welled in her eyes, but there was no sympathy left in me. I had suffered too much in my past life because of her. She clutched the poisoned drink, her knuckles white. Her entire plan had crumbled. Logan finally spoke, his voice even. Security. Two men immediately stepped forward. Sophia spun around, panic flooding her face. Wait! No. You can't. The guards grabbed her arms, pulling her away. She struggled, but it was useless. She had lost. Ethan made a move to slip away quietly, but Logan's voice cut through the air like steel. Not so fast. Ethan froze, turning slowly. For the first time, there was a flicker of real fear in his eyes. You didn't think I'd let you walk away, did you? Logan asked, tilting his head slightly. Ethan tried to recover his composure. I don't know what you're talking about. This was all Sophia's doing. Logan's lips curled into a slow, deadly smile. Is that so? A phone was placed on the table. A recording played. Ethan's own voice filled the air. Logan won't make it past tonight. Once he's dead, everything will be mine. Gasps spread through the hall. Whispers filled the air. Faces turned toward Ethan in shock and horror. His mask finally cracked. Logan's voice was calm. That's all the proof I need. Guards closed in around him. He lashed out, desperate to escape, but they were faster. He was dragged away, his furious screams echoing behind him. Sophia's broken sobs followed soon after. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 2 lifetimes of suffering finally lifting off my shoulders. It was over. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, I was free. Logan turned to me. You handled that well. I met his gaze. So did you. His eyes softened slightly. You're impressive, Susan. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The banquet hall had returned to normal, as if nothing had happened. But I knew everything had changed. Later that night, Logan and I walked into our home together. The air between us felt different, like something had shifted. I turned to him. I have something to tell you. He leaned slightly against the wall, waiting. Go on. I took a deep breath. I was planning to leave. Logan didn't react. He had already known. But I won't anymore, I continued. Because you were the only person who ever truly saw me. Something flickered in his gaze. Something undeniably real. His voice was softer this time. You were the only one who ever saw me too. A strange warmth settled in my chest. This wasn't the cold, distant Logan from my past life. This was someone different. Someone I had never truly known before. His fingers brushed against mine lightly. Stay with me. My breath caught. And for the first time, I allowed myself to believe in a future that belonged to me. I will, I whispered. This life was mine now. No one could take it from me ever again.